Hey everybody, welcome to Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations With. I'm your host, Gene Bernier, the Enjoyment Coach, and this is episode 43 with guest Greg Smyth. Greg is from St. John's, Newfoundland, and currently living with his wife, Amanda, and daughter, Poppy, in San Francisco Bay Area. He studied mechanical engineering at Memorial University, and he spent 10 years working in the oil and gas industry prior to moving to Silicon Valley in 2016. He recently launched Smyth Ventures to deliver his academy, teaching how to succeed at a Fortune 500 company, startup advising, and angel investing. Greg is developing content for a rapidly growing YouTube and LinkedIn community where he demystifies the mid-career pivot through sharing his experience pivoting from Exxon to Tesla, and now from Tesla into his own entrepreneurial adventure. He's helping people not just fall into the trap of endless sending out your resumes and hoping for the best. Greg is also the founder of GlobalNL, a nonprofit organization building a global community of people passionate about Newfoundland and Labrador. Greg, thanks so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So one thing I'll clarify is Smyth is the way we pronounce it.
Oh,
so
Smyth?
If my parents
Lord.
are watching, they might want me to correct it. So Smyth Ventures and Greg Smyth, if anyone's listening.
That's going to be a lesson learned. Again, I usually double check, but that's on me. So thank you for correcting. And that's what this show's all about, is actually, like we were talking about, building on the fly. Sometimes it's not always perfect.
Exactly.
All right. So tell us about your adventure and what's led you to, now going on 2 mid-career pivots in your life.
We can go back a long ways. I mean, I'm from, it's not a medium size. I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, so it's a very isolated place. That St. John's is a couple 100,000 people. I grew up there. I studied mechanical engineering, and, I'm making a video this week actually where when I came out of school, I felt like I probably had 2 options, it was to go work for the government or work for an oil company or in the oil industry. And I kind of picked oil because, it was the biggest, best paying, the most interesting. You could kind of get global experience from there. And I really leaned into that for almost 10 years, spending kind of 5 years in Newfoundland and then 4 years in Houston. I think in retrospect, I think, I was very engaged and loved, especially the first 4 or 5 years I spent with Exxon in Newfoundland, especially as, you're kind of early on in your career, you're trying to prove yourself, you're kind of, coming into your own. When I moved to Houston, I think 2 things happened. One was, you get to see a bigger world, moving to a big American city, you kind of get your aperture for the globe opens up. My wife and I traveled all over the world. I got, to work in the ExxonMobil headquarters, which was a big machine. So I think that opened my eyes to kind of a bigger part of the world. I traveled in things before, but when you live somewhere, you get a different informed experience of that. Right. But I think that the downside of that was working in Newfoundland for Exxon was a very small community. It was a couple of 100 people, or maybe 800, kind of working on that asset. Working in the headquarters is like you're a tiny cog in a gigantic wheel. And so kind of working in a group of 10,000 people was not the kind of rewarding experience. You kind of get closer to the big bosses, but, you kind of lose some meaning. And I think I started to drift away from that after 8 or 9 years with the company and kind of 4 years in Houston.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just, so at that point you're starting to drift, you're starting to question, why am I, do I still enjoy what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? What else could there be? Is like kind of like what was a bit of a catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, the thing underlying that, again, I was making these videos is a very introspective process that I never really understood before or never expected. But I, I was obsessed with Silicon Valley, probably tech forever. I used to go to Future Shop or Best Buy and just like walk around the aisles and just look at what the latest things were. And then when Steve Jobs and Apple were really rising with the iPad and iPhone, I was obsessed with like following that story. But it was more like watching a movie than like some kind of career plan, right? And so I followed that story very closely. And then in Houston, I remember distinctly, I was working in a certain department in this business planning organization, and I stumbled on a TED Talk. I'd started consuming these TED Talks, which had these very broad global topics and things like that. But I found the one about with Elon where he talked. It was his first one, I think, in 2015 or 2014, and he talked about SpaceX and Tesla, and I was like, how have I not heard of this guy before? And how do I learn more about it? And I started to get, that was after Steve Jobs died, and I really started to get obsessed. Like Elon was what felt like that new figure for innovation.
Yeah.
And he wasn't doing it in the computing space as much as like the real like industrial businesses that I was familiar with. And I think a couple of things coincided there where I I realized that like maybe I can contribute to like tech, especially in these kind of worlds, like, energy, climate change, even automotive is very heavy capex intensive business that I had experience in. And I think that was the first click. And then there was an oil downturn in 20 kind of 15 leading into 16. And, opportunities dry up, those opportunities to work global things, do what we wanted to do kind of evaporated. And we're presented with an opportunity to say, do we want to stay doing this, or do we want to less so like leave this thing and do this other thing? But we kind of looked at it as like, let's experiment. Let's go spend a couple of years in Silicon Valley, see if we like it. We can come back if we change our minds. I was knowingly very excited about it. My wife was sort of not on the fence about it, but she was less obsessed with the tech side of things.
So was it an adventure that you both chose to say, hey, we're going to commit to this experiment to see where it goes? So and obviously you have a family, and that's a big jump to take, like to be able to get through that conversation and one being more excited about it than the other. What was some like the considerations that you guys brought to the table in that discussion? Because that's a big part when you're in a family. Like making a jump like that isn't just a solo person's call.
Yeah, it was before we had kids, and I've been asked that a lot, like because a lot of people mid-career struggle with that, and there's no like I don't want to diminish that because I've got a 3-year-old now, and I think the amount of risk I would take now would be different than it would be before. Or like I'm in a little bit different stage of my life than I was then. But that having a supportive partner was like night and day. And because what I found was both of us had doubts at different stages, like very serious doubts about whether this was the right decision. We both had very successful careers at ExxonMobil. We made a lot, like a lot of money, if I'm being honest. We had very bright careers ahead of us. And it's like, I don't want to diminish like getting fired or getting laid off, but like your choice is kind of made for you. But leaving something that's kind of good, financially and socially, like most people think you have a great job, to leave that behind, it was very difficult. And also just like your expertise, the knowledge, the network, like 10 years is a long time. And so like the couple of things, we kind of toyed with the idea for a while, and we kind of went back and forth. No, we won't do it. We will do it. And there's two things that really stood out in my mind that I've started to share more openly. But one was we made a matrix. We sat down on a park bench in Houston. I still have a copy of that matrix
That's so cool.
That highlighted the 5 most important areas of our life. And one was professional. But the other ones were like lifestyle, a sense of adventure, our relationship with each other and our families. Even our like future family was something we kind of considered in that. And then we took the two options to kind of stay in the oil business or go to do the Silicon Valley thing. And we tried to be honest about it, to say, like, it could be worse, right? And we kind of recognized that, but it was on net, it seemed like to be a net benefit to try it. And so we left that park bench that day to say, okay, we should do this. And I think the second moment that I remember was in the weeks or kind of months following that, we still waffled quite a bit. And what happened next was I came home from work on a certain day, and my wife had a contract written and laid on the kitchen table, and it had two copies, one for me to sign and one for her to sign. And I share this as part of my course, and it was written in a way to say, like we're facing a lot of uncertainty. We don't really know what the outcome of this transition is going to be, but I trust myself, I trust my judgment and that of like my wife's, and we just have to do it. And that was the moment. And then when we signed that contract, making a decision like that, then you can make all the knock-on small decisions where it's like hiring movers or to quit, to actually putting a resignation. There's 1,000 things that fall from that.
Right.
Sign the contract was the moment where we were like, okay, this is happening. And we didn't quit till 3 or 4 months later, but that was the moment.
But then that must have had like a bit of like an energy or an excitement shift for you guys, where it's like sitting on the park bench, you've weighed the pros and cons, looking at it going, we could both handle this. And like, what's the worst case scenario? We come back. And then now you've gotten to this point where your wife puts the contract down and goes, we're doing this. And now all of a sudden it's just like, this is exciting and fearful all at the same time, because we are now actually officially moving forward. Yeah, we're doing this.
Yeah, but I think what I've learned too, like that's where the excitement and fear are coupled. Like there's two different ends of the same stick, and it's like I think now I'm on a different version of that journey, and you get more comfortable with the uncertainty aspects, or I think in trusting your own judgment. I think one of the mistakes I made in that period of time was I asked for a lot of input from other people. And not to say people gave me bad advice, but other people don't know what your own desires and skills are. They don't know what your personal circumstances are. They're often projecting kind of what their own biases are onto you. And I think I asked a lot of people for advice, whether this was a good idea or not. And that probably caused a lot of doubt in my own mind. That was like kind of I don't know if it was unnecessary, but it made things more difficult for me than they probably needed to be.
Right, because it would be fair to say, like in your like gut of gut, like in your heart, you knew that this was the right thing, and now all of a sudden you're getting like this kind of outside bias that's making that imposter go, "See, I told you, I told you this wasn't going to work."
Yeah, and I think I have, as I've gotten older, I don't know what intuition is or it means, but I have started to trust my intuition more. And I think it's important. It's an important thing to do. Because I like, and trusting your own track record to like, that I'm hardworking and very, adaptive and willing to learn new skills and to meet new people and those things, and to trust in that more than anything else. And that of my wife's too, like she's equally as capable, and to know that to trust our own desires and judgments to do that, and not, I think getting feedback from a very small group of people you trust very closely is helpful, but going broadly to ask people for input is often not super helpful in a circumstance like that.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a component of, are the people that I'm reaching out to, are they, how risk averse are they, right? Because like when you talk about like a job and everything else, like depending on the age demographic, and that in itself, like the older generation, our parents would be like, you get your job and you stay in your job and that's your lane. Why would you want it? Don't change your lane. That's crazy. Who thinks about changing their lane?
I know, and that's what I had in Newfoundland, I had the best job you could get. Exxon was the biggest oil company there. It had 2 huge projects, and there was a lot of people quite confused about why I would walk away from something like that. And understand, like I totally get that perspective, but like, they didn't see me at night watching YouTube videos about Tesla or buying a Model 3 when it launched on the first day, and the excitement that comes from that. And I think the other quote that I found helpful around that time was Mark Cuban said that, don't ask someone's advice advice or opinion that doesn't have that doesn't have to live with the consequences, right? And it's like, this is your life, and I hate to be dramatic, that like you're going to be dead soon, and if you don't do what you're really excited about, or at least give it a shot, then you know you only get so many shots on goal, especially you get older or you have a family. These things get more and more difficult to do, not easier.
And hearing that quote kind of reminds me of like Matthew McConaughey's got I've seen it on TikTok before, but he basically talks about half-assing life, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's like, why would you half-ass anything? If you make a decision, go all in, because even if it fails, you knew that you left everything on the table, and that you can walk away from and feel great about, right? And kind of like, that's similar to that Cuban quote for me.
Well, and that's what I think working at Tesla really pushed me. Like, Exxon was this big machine that was like, it was a very well-run company, very disciplined, very rigorous in decision making and things like that. But it was also like extremely resistant to change and very kind of stagnant from an innovation standpoint.
Yeah.
Tesla really pushed me beyond what I thought were my limits on making decisions quickly, facing uncertainty, being willing to be wrong, and that the mentality was to not make a decision had more consequence to making the wrong decision, and that you could often fix mistakes effectively in the future, opposed to you spending 6 months like kind of sitting on your hands trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And I think, in this journey I'm on now, starting a YouTube channel, I mean, it sounds equally as insane. Like, when I left Tesla, it had just hit almost $1 trillion market cap. And it's like, no, I'm going to leave Tesla, like this skyrocketing rocket ship, to go start a YouTube channel. I mean, that feels just as insane, but actually that's where, like, I think my intuition has told me, like, if I'm kind of getting those signals from external people, then maybe I'm actually heading in the right direction.
Right.
And to, again, trust my judgment, because, like, again, people, there's downsides of working at a company like that too, that other people that didn't experience it may not understand.
Right. So when you made this shift from Tesla now to your new entrepreneur spirit, how many people did you ask advice for or get feedback from this time?
Basically none.
Yeah.
Basically my wife and I, we talked about it, and I took some time off, and we can talk more about that. When we quit Exxon, we took probably total of 6 months, but really 3 or 4 months off in the summer of 2016. And we quit jobs kind of without jobs.
Right.
And I did something similar here. I kind of learned this concept from Tim Ferriss, and he called them kind of mini retirements. And, it's a luxury that I don't take for granted, but, it's like someone said, like, it's like waiting to have fun to when you retire is like saving up sex for old age. And, enjoying time with yourself and your family, or, just giving yourself a pause before you take on some new challenge, I think is really important. And I think often the reason people don't do it is more people, I think, than they realize can probably afford it. But it's like being unemployed just has all these social stigmas and these things that you don't really, and I think people struggle with, and I struggled with, especially the first time I did it. Who will I be? I think identity is another funny thing that happens, that we get tangled up in here, is like, who am I going to be if I'm not employed, or if I don't have, this identity tied up in that.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting, like, to think about it like that. And like, when you're talking about it, it's just like, am I employed or am I retired, right? Be like, well, it's funner to be retired than unemployed. And it's a great, like, just from a complete mental shift for yourself around thinking about waking up, be like, I get 3 months of retirement starting today. What a great time.
And I actually called it a sabbatical this time.
Yeah.
Because it's more like, I'll be honest, like, I don't have a lot of interest in like sitting on a beach drinking Mai Tais or something like that.
Yeah.
But it did give me time. Like, I've read 6 or 7 books, which is like more than I read in a year. I got to spend a ton of time with my daughter to do a bunch of, like, we kind of just bought a house to do a bunch of projects around here. And even like when I left Tesla, I think I had planned or thought it would likely be that I would go back and work at a big tech company. And until I got time to kind of decompress from that time and get some more space, I'd obviously thought about it before, but I was like, what other time am I going to get to do something like this? And I'm like, I think one of the original points about failure is like, there's like probably, I don't know if it's 50-50, but there's like a high probability that my YouTube channel like doesn't become like a full-time income or
Yeah.
kind of flounders and doesn't become its own thing. But I'm like, but it's worth a shot. I've thought about it for a long time and I should just give it a go. And you might be surprised that it might not end in the result that you set out to do, but the life, or what I realize, is when you put yourself out there that strange things happen that you never thought of in the beginning.
Oh, 100%. And you never know, like somebody's going to watch one of these videos and be like, I need to do a collab with Greg, like right now. And that's that thing that kicks off, or all of a sudden you spin something out of this that turns into a wonderful new venture that you never would have even considered if you hadn't taken that steps and you just got started, right? Like
that's already happened. Like, to be honest, I can't tell you specifically, but I was offered, it's not a job, but it's like a part-time role that I have, and I'm super excited about it. But it was an opportunity that effectively, probably more from my LinkedIn post than from YouTube. But it directly led to an opportunity that I'd planned to pursue probably in 5 years from now, but is not landed in my lap. But because I've been building in public, this opportunity kind of rolled up on my shores that I hadn't really gone looking for.
That's incredible, man. And like we were talking about when we were getting prepped for the show, just getting started, right? Like, and if you had sat on your hands waiting for the perfect videos and the perfect posts to come out, none of this would have happened. I kind of like the way that you described, like building in public. You want to share that concept with the rest of the audience?
Yeah, there's a couple of like people that I've been following, like YouTube, mostly YouTubers, but a few people that are kind of online writers. They call themselves like citizens of the internet, which is like a strange concept to think about. But we all have digital presence, but really thinking about it from like a different perspective, this kind of like citizen of the internet is a powerful one. But building in public being, the idea, say, behind writing a book, 50 years or 100 years ago, you hear these stories about writers going to, a cabin in the woods to write a book for a year and then coming out with this magical masterpiece. And I think with the internet, it creates this opportunity to get feedback that, I have heard this concept, someone I heard recently that, if you write about 1,000 words a week, or maybe more, maybe 2,000 words a week, it's kind of like you'll be writing a book a year or something to that effect,
Right.
Maybe every 18 months. And so like, that was really powerful to me to think like, I always wanted to write a book, but never thought I would. I don't think I'm an exceptionally good writer. I think I'm like a good communicator, but probably not a great writer. But I'm like, okay, if like writing is a form of communicating, and now you like effectively going to write a book this year through YouTube form.
Yeah.
And I think building in public is, you're really doing that in like small amounts. So like you could say a tweet is like testing a sentence. On LinkedIn, I can test a paragraph or even a chapter, and a YouTube video is maybe a more comprehensive version of that. And because of the nature of social media, you get this like very rich feedback cycle. And like there's negative sides to social media that I have concerns about, but if you're willing to be open and vulnerable with your content creation and ultimately trying to spread your ideas, it's a very powerful thing. And I think people can tell, though, because even I've experimented with some posts that I think you could argue were just not that valuable, and you can people can tell, people can see through like kind of surface level posts. But when you're very open and vulnerable about your struggles, what's and what whatever concept you're trying to communicate, I think it resonates with people, and getting that feedback in public is very powerful.
Have what's been what am I trying to ask? So has there, while you're doing this testing, this learning, like you're kind of like shaping your own voice and finding out like what works and where's the edges you need to play in, have you posted something yet where you're like, I don't know if I should post this, and you did it anyways? And how did you find that it reacted? Like those ones that you kind of initially think, I'm going to hold back on.
Yeah, I think the secret is like the vulnerability is where the magic is. And like I don't have any unique, not that I'm not unique, but what's unique about you is your story, right? And if you want to learn how to write LinkedIn messages, I'm probably not like an expert in that field, but there is elements of my story that can be valuable to people, and I think, if you're from a small town in Canada and want to work in Silicon Valley, my story can resonate with a lot of people like that. And maybe if you're not, maybe if you're from a small town in the Middle East and want to work in some, like, you can port that experience onto a lot of different circumstances. But the hard things for me were sharing my, like, very personal stories, about why I left the oil business, even putting out that first YouTube video, or I made a video about the biggest fears that I face and what a lot of people face. And I had actually recorded a video before I left Exxon, and I look like I'm flushed in the face. I look very like it looks like I'm having a panic attack or something. For some reason, I recorded it, and I'm talking about the fears of, like, leaving, and I'm like, I don't really know if I should do this. And I had a lot. I think there was a couple of videos where I uploaded them, I deleted them because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to put this out into the world.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm learning is, like, if that feeling is present, it's probably a good signal that you're actually pushing beyond some comfort zone, opposed to, I think I worried about kind of oversharing things, but I think, that if you do it right, in the right framing, that is where the value most people get.
Right. Yeah, it really does come down to that vulnerability and, like, sharing it. And, like, when you talk, and I agree, like, the story is what we have, that is our unique spin on life. We all get to go through it. We all get born and we all die. And then there's a whole bunch of things that happen in the middle that make us who we are today. Yeah. And a lot of people can take what you're saying and transpose that into not just, like, going from, like, oh, I'm a small town, raised in a small town. Now I'm working with Elon Musk, who's trying to take everybody to Mars. But you can spin that around, just trying to get out of your own sector, sometimes just getting out of your own way and taking a jump, going, well, a lot of the things he's talking about, like, I can see that in myself. So if he can do it, I can do it. And then as well, like, earlier you were talking about, like, having that confidence in yourself of, like, or how do you overcome that doubt, is, like, go back into the well of all of your own stories, going, when was the last time, like, I conquered something? Be like, oh, I got like 10 of those back there. Oh, that's right, I can conquer things. Yeah. It's just I've never conquered this one before. Am I capable? Am I adaptable? And all that other stuff.
Yeah, it's like those things are real. And I think, because and the reason I think it's important to be vulnerable, like, for instance, if you just, like, look at my LinkedIn profile, like, it can be quite a romantic story on the surface level, to say, like, oh, you did this, and it's a lot of people are kind of excited about that surface level story, but the amount of work and stress and anxiety and uncertainty you had to face to do that was not easy. And I think trying to be open about that, like, but and I do agree that a lot of what I see people do, the barriers that people face is typically, like, them getting in their own way, not, like, kind of the world getting in theirs.
Yeah.
And, like, there certainly is, it's hard to get a job with an exciting brand or a company, but typically, people, what I find is most people give up too soon. It's like they take a couple of interviews, they kind of get rejected, and then they give up. And I'm like, I was just telling them, I was like, it's going to take 6 months to a year, maybe even a couple of years if you're doing it part-time. And just don't give up. Just, like, keep doing it, and you'll learn every time you get rejected from an interview, you'll learn. And, but yeah, I think that's an important part.
Well, I think that's an important distinction that you share right there, is that learning component, right? People may, I can be just as guilty as this, is where, like, you start slamming something out and you don't even ask for the feedback, or you don't start to test and try different things, and you just keep going, why is this not working? I guess I should send more of the same thing out and go, no, stop, learn, try. If it's not working, that's okay. Like, you already know how not to do this once, so let's find more exciting ways to not do this, right? Until you find the one that does start to click.
Yeah, and I think I went down on my recent, I posted yesterday on LinkedIn that my YouTube channel has effectively, like, been consistently going down in interest, like from the beginning. Kind of, you want it to be this exponential curve up to the right. Mine's like going down to the down to the right. And I think, and one of the things I kind of got stuck, not in a rut, but I started like focusing very tightly on my career pivot, which I think is good, and I will continue to do that. But I think, I originally launched to do broader, the broader message of how to be successful in a Fortune 500 company, or kind of a big, being successful in a Fortune 500 company. And I think I need to go back to that. Some of those broader themes are very, like, I think I have a unique perspective on and can offer that. And these pivots are a really important part of that, being adaptive to try very new things outside of the industry you do work in. Or I think what a lot of people don't think about is pivoting within their own company or industry is also important. And something I'll probably focus more on in the future.
Right. It's like, you've got entrepreneur, slowpreneur, and then the intrapreneur, which is that person that can take and build their career within another person's, or, another company, right? Like for you, you've worked at two Goliaths in each of their industries and able to take that information and learned how to hop between the two. And now that's an extremely rich story to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think that the part that I'm most excited to talk more about in the future is kind of the work-life balance. It's a little bit of a platitude, but for me, like, I want my cake and eat it too. I think a lot of people do. And I try my best, and I think I did a pretty good job, and I have a lot to share because both my wife and I are ambitious and want to work with great companies and work on really challenging problems with engaged teams. But we also want to have a life outside of that, to have time with our family, to travel the world, to, have relationships with our extended families and friends. But that is really hard to have when you work in a very competitive, big company that is always demanding more of you. It's very hard. It's hard to get that balance. And I call it more of like a tug of war, or like a battle or something like that you have to fight for that balance on a daily basis. But I think it's important because I think a lot of people are ineffective or struggle with that a lot. And I have, certainly.
So were you able to find a spot where you're able to set up like healthy boundaries between work and life, and being able to when to say yes and when to say no, and doing that with a bit of you have to do it with a bit of assertiveness and authority from yourself to stand up to that culture. I've lived in tech. I understand like the concept. We're going to work 80 hours a week and only pay you for 40. This is great. What an awesome opportunity you have, right? Like that culture is really real, and it's very pervasive.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people don't talk about, which I think is fair, is like it's enjoyable. Like being good at your job and being pushed to take on a lot of responsibility is like that is a very dopamine rich, very enjoyable process. At least it has been for me, and I think a lot of people. And like being a workaholic or working a lot, it's not like there's reasons why people do it. It's because it's enjoyable, right? And I think there is a feedback cycle in there that you have to be very careful not to get caught into too much. But sorry, I lost my train of thought on your question on how to do that.
Yeah, so the question was like, how did you find yourself setting up those boundaries there?
You had to be ruthless, and I think like that's an appropriate word for it. Like I managed a team of 18 people at Tesla, and I communicated to them like what I wanted from my life and how I ran my life basically. And so like I was like I had a very strict calendar with like I would block out time for like deep work at work. I would like block out that time. I had like very not advanced, but like a very clear email management system that allowed me to like focus on emails in like a systematic way. And like for instance, I used to get carbon copied on probably like 100 emails a day. And people that report to you often do it to kind of cover their own ass, to say like, I told my boss about this, so if something goes wrong, it's not my fault. And I used to tell people like that is not true. Like because you carbon copy me on something does not mean I'm aware of it. And I may read like 10% or sometimes 50% of those emails, And I was very open and honest about that. And so I think some of those things, and then setting those expectations with your managers too, like who you report to, is important, and making sure they're aligned with that. And then hopefully you can have, there's like flexibility, if there's flexibility in the workplace, but you have to enforce that too, where, I leave between like 3 and 4 on a Friday, and to get home with my family and enjoy like Friday night and the weekend. But there would be like, I would often work on Sundays, like early on Sunday mornings or late on Sunday nights, to get caught up on, what happened in those previous 2 days. And
Right.
so there's a million things in there, and boundaries are a very important part of that. Building systems also to help you, like really, you need systems to set those boundaries for you,
Yeah.
or at least help you, because it's so easy to get swept up in it in a given work week.
Oh, 100%. Like if you don't have it, and it doesn't matter what your system is, if it's a ruthless email system, or it's being able to say, set your top priorities, whatever you need to do is like you set those boundaries and you work for it, because it's what's going to allow you to do, show up, in your case, and I guess both of our cases, to be an excellent entrepreneur and as well an excellent father and husband, right? Like all those roles are like actually very, very important. Like they're the top priority, right?
The other part I've learned more about, I think, especially as we really digitized, like to become fully plugged in, is that like the mental barriers are more important than the time ones. It used to be like kind of, people would stay at the office till 10 p.m., but now it's like your brain stays at work till 10 p.m. because you're checking your phone and all these things. And that's probably the bigger challenge, especially in Silicon Valley. Like you're so connected, and the expectations around messages and things like that can be very difficult. But like setting time and making sure your brain, you're sitting at the kitchen table. Is your brain at the kitchen table, or is it still at the Tesla factory, on the other side of the bay?
Yeah. And how were you able to do that? And I'm assuming, listening to this, that you'd encourage your staff to have those same type of like off time, be present when you're not here.
Exactly. I would really encourage it. And I think I used to joke, I used to spend more time telling people to work less, not more, at Tesla, because if you're around like an ambitious company and it kind of attracts a certain type of person, like people will work themselves to death, and I used to, like, burnout was a real thing. And I was very actively trying to encourage people to set those boundaries, and to take time when they could or should. For me, it's like I have, taking care of myself, my health is like, if I don't take care of myself, like it's like putting on that oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
I can't really be helpful I can't be a great leader or manager. I can't be a great father or husband. And so, exercising regularly is super important. Eating well as best I can. Limiting alcohol, I think as I've gotten older, I've realized is more important. More from a sleep perspective, it's kind of, I think it messes with my sleep a little bit too much. And then some things around meditation, I've fallen out of a little bit of a routine, but taking care of your brain is really important. And that you just kind of stimulate it all day long, and making sure you're setting, and doing things proactively to take care of your brain, I think. Because the way I try and think about it is like most knowledge workers are cognitive athletes, and it's important to take care of your body, but you need to be very mindful of your information, your digital diet. And I don't see a lot of people doing that, especially in Silicon Valley.
Well, I think I never thought about that as the metaphor before, but like, they're cognitive athletes, high performing athletes. And do they want to blow their knee out, when they're just in the middle of their career, or do they want to take incredible good care of themselves to have a very, be like the Tom Brady of creative workers, right?
Yeah. Well, I also think like it's my favorite book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey kind of says something like, it's really easy. And again, like it's dopamine rich to get what he calls caught up in the thick of thin things. And it's like, whether it's the email threads or the text messages and these kind of things, it's very satisfying, but you often like don't get anything done. You can reply to 100 emails and not do anything. And I think that's where the mental, if you take care of your brain, you'll realize it's easier to see what the clear priorities are, to focus in on what the asymmetric projects or points of leverage you have. And to do that. I do have a pretty rigorous kind of weekly planning process, which helps kind of set those big rocks out at the beginning of the week, and still do that.
Do you care to share what that process is?
Yeah, it's not that magical, but I use a to-do list app, which kind of allows you to just to sort the to-dos. And what I do is try and do it on either on Friday afternoon when I finish my week, or on Sunday night. I'll set my priorities for the following week. And typically I'll do two kind of big things, 2 to 3 kind of big projects or things I want to ship that week. And then there'll be a series of other ones, kind of 3 or 4 other kind of medium to low priorities that I'll put on there. And then I print a physical copy of that and I put it in like a clear cover that I lay on my desk here. And then basically what I do every morning, I still do this, is I pull that out and then I write a to-do list for that day. I'll typically write kind of professional and personal things, kind of 3 to 4 professional, like, and they're kind of subset of what the bigger goals are. Put probably 3 to 4 things on that list from a professional standpoint. And then if there's kind of personal things I had to do, I'll also write down 1 or 2 of those.
Nice.
And I'll also write out the 3 things I'm grateful for, kind of on that same page. That really works for me. I think even before, I had this like deluge of things to do working in a big company, especially Tesla, and that planning process helped me say, okay, I have to get these 3 things done this week, and regardless of if I get 800 emails or not. Now it's like I have a clear calendar. I can do whatever I want, but that can be just as overwhelming as the deluge. And so I think defining some of that up front has been really, really impactful and powerful concept. I think the weekly, I've gone through all these iterations of this, and it does seem like weekly planning is the right level for me. I do look at about quarterly to set some bigger kind of targets and goals, but the weekly planning exercise is really helpful for me.
It's interesting. The more you're talking, I'm just like, oh, we have a lot more in common. Is, I do like the exact same thing. It's like, what am I going to do for the week or the day? Plan out my calendar on a Sunday, and I actually have an accountability friend that we share what our top priorities are. And I find that the days that I have those are like my most productive. That I'm not in that bit, not trying to earn that busy badge. Yeah. And the days that I don't, is just like, why did the day feel like it went off the rails a little bit? I'm like, oh God, I forgot to do that this morning. And you jumped right into something and you get moving ahead. So
those are the worst days, I find, when I'm like, if I get up late and I'm tired and I don't do that exercise, and the day just kind of slips by, and you're like, what happened today?
It's funny how quickly, like, when you have that disciplined life, when you step out of it, even just for like a day or two, like, wildly feel it, and you can see the big difference in it.
Yeah. I think some people think it's too rigorous, but the Jocko Willink kind of saying that I think discipline equals freedom. I think having some of those things defined gives me, when I finish up at 5 o'clock, it's like I kind of have a clear head that I got done what I needed to get done, and I can move on. And someone said, a mentor of mine really taught me this weekly planning process, and he told me he said, your RAM, like, if you don't have something like this, your RAM, or your like random access memory, from computers, you're trying to store everything in RAM. And it's like, it's a really bad approach. Your brain is like a good place to generate ideas, but not store them. And it's like, you need to have tools, note-taking, and to do things that can externalize those thoughts.
Well, and as well, like, you dump it to that external storage and it frees it up to go off and be creative, instead of doing what it sucks at, is remember this to-do list. Don't forget this. Yeah. I don't know about you, but every time I'm like, oh, don't forget this, and I don't write it down or put it in my capture list, be like, I always forget it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think it's taken me a long time to learn that lesson, but I think I've got the tools now to help me through that.
Perfect, man. Well, you know how I said at the start of the show I was going to look up and be like, wow, we're at 40 minutes. We're at 45 minutes, so I want to be respectful of your time, okay. Greg. So where can people find you, and what's coming up next to give a shout out for yourself?
I think there's 2 main places you can look me up on LinkedIn to search Greg or Gregory Smyth, Smyth. On LinkedIn, you can follow me there, or my YouTube channel to search Greg Smyth. I'm trying to be the top YouTube channel if you search, but hopefully I'm either the first or second one if you search on YouTube. Those are the two best places. If you can't subscribe to my channel, it's helping me get off the ground. Getting to first 1,000 subscribers is an important milestone for me. So if you can help me out, and feedback's always helpful. If you want to see different content, or feel free to comment on LinkedIn posts or videos. I'm always happy to get that.
Perfect. Well, let's help Greg get to that 1,000 subscribers, folks.
Yeah.
All right, man. So I've got the one last question that I ask everybody. So we're going to jump into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years. You get to give yourself one piece of advice, and it can't be like lotto numbers or anything like that.
One piece of advice. Don't think too long term, or like don't plan. Like I probably still have it written down somewhere. Like I had these like career plans out like for my entire life almost, or kind of this vision at least that I was going to be this manager or the senior person in Exxon or something, and was very diligently trying to work towards that. I think what I realized is just like, you just have no idea what the future is going to bring, and I think you can plan out. You certainly want to, I think it's important to define your values and try and live in accordance with them. You don't want to kind of let the world push you through life, but trying to be overly rigid about what the future looks like or what success looks like, I think is a mistake. I think one, because it just kind of constrains what the outcomes can be. And it just takes a lot of, and I think as part of that, it takes a lot of the joy or the serendipity about the opportunities that are out there. And I think, so that would be the advice, just to kind of embrace the uncertainty of that. And really just, I think the other part of that is to take more risk. I've started taking more risk as I got older, which is probably not the optimal way to do it. I'm still grateful that I've gotten to take the risks I have now, but I should have probably taken more risk earlier in my life when the consequences were lower. But either way, it's I'm still grateful for the journey I've taken, so I don't have any regrets in that specific circumstance. But don't plan too far in the future and take more risk.
Love it. Those are great things, and I think those can be applied at any stage of our life. So, Greg, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on the show today. And to everybody else, thanks for watching. This has been episode 53 of Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations With. We're back next Wednesday and every Wednesday following that for the rest of this year. Until then, we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it.